Hello everyone. In this video, hopefully today, I will show you how to use the Paxton Net2 API to control doors, and there's lots of other things that it can do, but in my demonstration I'm just going to get it to log in, control some doors, and then you should be pretty well set to go from there, then doing other functions if you need to do it. This will be in VB.net, so Visual Basic.net. There are a lot of examples, and all the provided examples by Paxton are in C, I think C# or C++.net. I prefer VB.net, mainly because I grew up doing Visual Basic Standard before .net and ASP Classic as well, so I'm kind of in that world. So yes, I have my Net2 server, which is in demo mode, so I've just installed it in demo mode, and then I have my Windows, so that's on Windows 7, which I expect a lot of these Net2 servers are on. And then my development box, which I'll do all the programming on, is Windows 10. So easiest way to tell whether I'm on the server is the start menu. So you've got the Windows 7 style start menu and the Windows 10 style start menu. So on my Windows 10 I have Visual Studio installed, and let's go off and download the API. So Net2 API. Hopefully it'll be on the first result will be the Net2 or Paxton forum. Normally, let's go Paxton forum, Net2 SDK by Paxton, and it's the pinned one about the download link. So download link, download the SDK. So I've already installed the Net2 software, with a caveat which I'll show you later, because it took me a while to work out a problem that I had when I initially did this. So once installed, download the SDK, which you'll find here. So let's download that. Oops. Download the SDK. And I'm going to extract it. And we want to, I think it's the redist we want to install. If you're using a remote PC to test my app, we need to install both files. So let's do setup OEM first. And then redist OEM. On my production system, these setups, when they got to the end, took probably about 15 minutes each to complete, so I think there might be something slightly inefficient in the setup. But if you go to install those on your own systems and they seem to take a very long time, then that is usual. Just wait and eventually they will complete. We also need to install the SDK on the server as well. So where are the instructions? So 2 files. On the Net2 server you only need to install setup OEM. So I've now installed the Net2 software, or the Net2 SDK, which now it should be ready to be used by Visual Studio. So let's give it a go. Right, so Visual Studio is now open and ready to create a new project, so I'm going to go New Project. I want to use Windows Classic, Windows Forms application, just because I'm lazy and just want buttons and stuff to click on. It's going to be the easiest way to demonstrate this. I'm going to call it Net2 SDK Client. You can obviously call that whatever you want, or the code that you're going to put in will be in an existing project. It's, you know, that bit's down to you. And OK. And there's the form, so just going to chuck a couple of buttons on it. So toolbox button, that will do for the moment, and I shall call that button list users, or I guess list probably logons is more likely, because that's the logons are the first bit to authenticate with the Net2 thing. Let's go into the code for this. First, we need to add a reference to the SDK. So, if I remember where it is correctly, you need to go Project, Add Reference, and Browse. And it's under the C drive, so this PC, C drive. If I remember correctly, it's under Program Files, Reference Assemblies, Paxton Access, Paxton Net2 OEM Client Library. So just to show you there, Program Files x86, Reference Assemblies, Paxton Access, and then the DLL, the Paxton DLL that's in there. So we've added that as a reference, and I then need to import. Not sure what they're called in VB.NET, but ready to basically use those terms from that reference. So imports Paxton dot Net2 OEM client library. And for my button, let's see what we can do. So I'm going to create some variables for overall usage. So I'm going to go dim s server for string as the server, as string equals, and then this is where I need the IP address of my Net2 server. So that's 10.0.2.15. And iServer port as integer, and the standard port that this runs on, I believe, is 8025. Let's just quickly double check that. Yep, 8025. And when we open the application, so form 1, there's events, form 1 events, load. I need to connect, so but anyway, right, we need to also do a dim the actual Net2 connection itself. So I'm going to call it Net2, or let's call it my Net2 client, as new OEM client, and then you put in brackets the server, it says there, the remote host, so the server IP address and the remote port, but I've already got variables for those, so it's S server and S server port. So we already have server IP, server port, and then we've created a Net2 client with that server IP and port. We should then be ready to use that. I actually don't think I need to do anything on load of the form to connect. I think I'd literally just start using it. So when I click the button for listing the logons, I would like a list of the usernames that exist within the Net2 system. So we then want to do a strange way of doing operators. It doesn't just give you a list like an array of strings for the logons. You need to do a dictionary and load stuff into the dictionary from Net2. So I want to do dim say my operators object, which is just any variable. You could call that whatever you want. So as ioperators, which I think is a Net2 type, and then we want to equals my Net2 client, to use the client to get list of operators. So that will have loaded kind of like a proprietary format variable called myOperators object. So the next thing is we need to get the data out of that into something that we can loop through as an array or whatever. So I want to do dim myOperators diction. Whoops, if I can type correctly. Dictionary as new dictionary of, and then the types that you will be given by Net2 is an integer, which is the user ID, and a string, which is the user name. And we want to set my operators dictionary equal to the my operators object dot users dictionary. So Net2 provides a dictionary from their ioperators object, which we then need to load into our dictionary. We can then do or loop through the list of users. So I am going to create a blank variable, so dim users list as text as string, and then I'm going to loop through the operators dictionary, loading each username, or basically just into something we can then put into a message box just so you can see how it comes out. So for each my operator in my operators operators dictionary, and I'm going to go users list as text equals user in quotes user ID ampersand my operator dot key, which is the ID, ampersand user name my operator dot value, and then a line return, so vbcrlf, and I need in here the previous loop, so we don't lose the data when it runs through each time. So users list as text will become users list as text, and then it will append on the user ID and user name. And then I want to message box user list as text. So I'm about to run it. I'm almost certain it won't work first time, which I'll explain to you in a moment why. So let's press F5 and see what happens. There's many things that can go wrong with this, so it's compiling at the moment in the bottom. Don't particularly need the diagnostic tool, that can disappear. move that over. So if I press this list logons button, I'm sure it will come up with an error, but let's give it a go. So it tells you which URL it's using here. So I can tell I've got the correct IP address of the server and the correct port. But then it's had a problem. The way to diagnose things here is if you hover over, I think it's the Net2 client, then do the little drop down arrow, it will then say last error message. So no connection could be made because the target actively refused that. So we'll go through that in a moment. Or in the intermediate window you could do my net2 client dot last error. And there you go, no connection could be made because the target machine actively refused it. Okay, so I've found the problem, which is the networking that's set up by default just in the NAT mode on VirtualBox doesn't allow communications between the two machines. So now I've created a new network with communication between them. They should be able to work, but the IP addresses will have changed. So 192.168.15.5, and then over in my code here I need to do the same thing, 192.168.15.5. And let's try this code again and see. This time I think I'm going to get a different error, and I've done this deliberately because this is the first problem that I came across and spent quite a while trying to work out before realizing what the problem was, even though it says it in the forum post where you download the SDK. But I will just quickly go through it to show you the error message that comes up, so you should be aware to watch out for this problem. So let's see whether it's a different error this time. So we've got a system exception, but if I do hover my mouse over the Net2 client, do the plus or the little arrow next to it, instead of saying yes, perfect. Instead of saying that the computer actively rejected it, which was a communication issue between either being blocked by Windows server, Windows firewall, or in my case being blocked by the VirtualBox networking. In this instance now, it's falling off the edge of this, so we can't really see it, so I could actually do in the intermediate my net2 client.last error. Unable to read data from the transport connection. Connection attempt failed because the party did not properly respond after a period of time, or an established connection failed because connected host failed to respond. So I spent quite a while wondering why it couldn't connect when actually it does. So if I do 15.5 port 8025, that's actually connecting. So the server is accepting the connection but not responding with data on it. The error message you get here looks almost like the connection is still not succeeding, but what's actually happening is it's connecting, it's sending some data or a request and not getting the correct reply back. The issue there is because, and I hope it's got the version number in the downloads folder, I've installed version 5.04 and then a build number of the SDK or the API, yet my Net2 server is only running 5.2, so 5.04, which I presume means 5.4. The version mismatch causes this communication problem, and before you upgrade your Net2 system, you need to be very aware that the moment you install the new version of the Net2 access control server, it will then go through all of your doors and firmware update them, which, if it's a live site, is an incredibly annoying thing to happen if you're not expecting it. So I did it on a Friday morning and probably started about 10:30. All of the firmware updates in a small site, probably the same number of doors that's in their demo setup, must have taken probably 4 hours, and when it does the firmware updates, some of the doors will not function for a short period of time, so probably be about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, while it's doing the update, that the door has upgraded but won't have a database of all the either the opening times, so the door which should normally be open during a certain time period suddenly becomes locked, or it doesn't have the database of the cards, so people swipe their card, it makes a beep noise but doesn't unlock the door for the user. So be very aware before you upgrade this, if you need to get this software working. Make sure that when you upgrade the Net2 server that it is at a low door usage time, or overnight, or sometime when you're not going to be inconveniencing a huge number of people going through doors or trying to get access to a building, etc. So I will now go and upgrade my server to the 5.4 version. So I've already got the SDK, but I do need the latest Net2 software. So that's quite a hefty download. That's going to take a couple of minutes here. I will probably chop this section out of the video, so the next thing you'll see is once the download is finished. Okay, so the download is finished, so I'm going to extract that to... Oh, may as well go straight to the downloads folder, that's not a problem. Remember, this section is only required if your Net2 version is not up to date, or not up to date enough. You might find the slightly newer versions, but not quite as old as the one that I just demonstrated with, may still function with the SDK. But bear in mind, if the SDK moves on and your Net2 installation, server installation doesn't, you may then have communication problems. Right, so after that absolute mammoth of an update, and to save some disk space I do need to delete those. Let's restart the machine and continue our programming. Let's try again. That's more like it. Oh wow, they enforce you to change your password in this version, whereas previously they didn't. So I'm going to call this password demo. I know there is a tiny ignore this message in the bottom, but I'm going to change the password for the moment anyway. So it's now demo for my setup. So back to where we were. We should now be on 5.04, which is now in parity or kind of in step with the SDK version. So if I now go to run this, we should get some action. List logons, says it's connecting to the endpoint, and there we go. There is a list of all the logons on the Net2 system. So if I go to Net2 operators, system engineer, OEM client, we've got OEM client and system engineer. The OEM client is the one that Paxton recommend that you use. For this demonstration I'm just going to use system engineer because I'm lazy and I know it works. For your setup you should probably read the documentation and enable and set a password for the OEM client user. So that is a Visual Basic.NET program setting up a Net2 client, connecting to the server and listing the user IDs that you can connect with. So we do need to know which user ID the system operator is. So I'm going to click on list logons again. It's user ID 0. So now we've got the logons working, or listing the logons. I now need to create a button to list the doors that we have access to. So there's a new button, I'm going to call it list doors. I'll click on it and create some code. If it wants to let me, yep, there we go. So when I click on button 2, first off we need to authenticate. So we know the user IDs and the names that they're associated with. So as I say, I'm going to use the system operator one, which is user ID 0, and the demo password, or the password of demo, which I have set. Their instructions say to use the OEM client user, but I'm too lazy to use that for the moment. But for a production system you should probably use that, especially if it's going to be supported, if you're ever going to speak to Paxton about it. So first thing we need to do is authenticate with the Net2 server. So we go Net2, or my Net2 client dot authenticate user. Start with the ID of the user, which for system operator is 0, and then the password, which in my case is demo. Then, after you have authenticated, we want to list the doors. So unlike the one up here with the users, where you had to create a get list of operators and then create a dictionary and stuff like that, the doors seems to be slightly different. It's not quite so complicated. So we can do dim my doors equals my Net2 client dot view doors, and I'm going to do it to a message box again, so I need a variable to load everything into, or a string to load everything into. So dim my doors as text as string, and then for each door in my doors dot doors list, and we want to load it into my doors as text equals my doors as text, because I want to keep the previous loop's data. And then we want door address door dot address, and door name door dot name, and then a line return at the end of that. So that code is there, so it's loading that into a variable for each of the doors within that door list. And I want to then message box my doors as text. So now if we load up this code, we should hopefully get a list of the doors. List doors, and perfect. So make a note of the door that you want to open. In this instance I'm going to try and open this door, which is 108006. So temporarily just chuck it in here. 108006. Going to add another button to open that door. So opens doors door, and again we need to authenticate, because unless you've got it authenticates when you start up the application, it could be that the user loads up your application, just clicks straight onto button 3, so make sure you either have a duplicate authenticate in there or you authenticate when you load up the application. So authenticate user, and it's as simple as my Net2 client dot open door, and then that door address. So I'd copied that earlier, paste it into there. You can also do a time to keep the door open, so you could do comma and do 30, and it would keep the door open for 30 seconds, or whatever value you decided was a good idea. For this test I'm just going to do the standard door open time, so I'm just going to send the address of the door that I want to open, and that's it. So if I go to the events list, run my program, wait for it to compile, and open stores door. And hopefully, if we go to the Net2 software, yep, System Engineer, Stores, Request Door Open, Request Door Open with network instruction. So that's definitely worked. So if I click this button 3 times, we should see hopefully 3 entries of that. Yep, Request Door Open with network instruction. So that's definitely working. That's a good start. That should get you going, and then you can read the manual or the forum on the Net2 SDK on all the other functions you can do, like configuring the doors, disabling people, doing whatever else it is you may want to do. So, but there are a couple of other things we can do to improve this program here. So at the moment, if the password is wrong, so if I change that to be the incorrect, let's do it on something which returns some data. So if I do the wrong password and then try and run it, there's no error catching. So if there's a problem, we don't know that a problem has occurred. It will just crash out with an unhandled exception. So let's just demonstrate. List the doors, and that section has the wrong password. It just says unhandled exception, doesn't even say why, it just says that the object isn't set. So the ways around this: for authentication, there is just an if you can do. So you can encompass everything in an if. So if my net2 client dot is operator logged on, then we want to do all of these things. Then else message box not authenticated, probably wrong password. So that will immediately make things slightly more user-friendly for your users. So if somebody's changed the system admin password or the SDK user password, and somebody's using your remote control app and they click on a button, instead of just saying that the variable wasn't set or just giving an unhandled exception, at least with this you can say not authenticated, probably the wrong password. So that's much more user-friendly. I probably should wrap the code below in that as well. Again, this is a very inefficient way of coding it. You'd probably have this happen when you loaded the program, so you only had one set of checking whether it's logged on, but for this demonstration I'm adding in a second one. So the next thing you can do is, if we try and open a door that's got the wrong serial number, so if I do where it's got a 0 at the beginning, so 108, let's change that to 198, which is a door which doesn't exist in our setup. And we run it. So open the store's door. To the end user it will look like it worked, but if we go over to the Net2 software, absolutely nothing has happened because it's been told to open a door that doesn't exist. So again, you can improve your program here by taking the response from this open door. So we can go if my Net2 client open door is true, then message box, if I can type correctly, the door was opened. Else, because the only other option for that being true is false, message box, the door failed to open. Did you use the right door address? It's looking like it might not. No, I see. If my net2 equals true rather than is. So if I now do that again, it should warn me that the door didn't open. Sadly, I can't tell exactly why the door didn't open. It just comes back with a true or a false. But again, at least to the user, if for some reason somebody's disabled the door on the net2 server, or you've got the configuration wrong and you're sending the wrong door address, you get a message saying that the door failed to open. If I go and amend this to be the correct door ID, we should then get a message saying that the door was successfully opened. Yep, the door was opened. If we go to the net2 server, stores door with network instruction. Hopefully that has given you quite a good head start into communicating with the net2 software and opening doors and getting you on the way to doing any other things that you want to control via the API or the SDK for the net2 Paxton system. It's pretty good. I use it to open a door in a reception where they didn't install a door open button at the side of the office where the receptionist sits. So every time somebody wants to come in, she has to get up, go halfway across the office to press the button. So yeah, instead she has a bit of software on her computer. She just clicks a single button and the door opens without her having to move. It's pretty useful. You could tie this in with all sorts of things like an app on the internet or whatever you needed to do, but do be very aware of security considerations, because if you make your application open to the internet and able to open doors in your building, and you have not built your application securely enough, then anyone will be able to open the door without authentication, or they'll be able to keep a door open. Just be very aware of who you give access to, how you're securing your part of the software, and I would recommend never to make your net2 software available on the internet. Always have it behind a firewall. Make sure that nobody, say for example if I am an attacker, you don't want it so that I can write my own software and put in office.bigcompany.com and try and guess your net2 usernames and passwords. So definitely have a very big think about the security considerations of anything you do. But good luck. If this has been helpful, and I hope it has, it would be so helpful to me if you could subscribe. YouTube seem to be keen on judging people by the number of subscribers they have, and if you don't have enough subscribers you then can't make money out of the advertising. It takes me, well, for this video it's going to have probably taken me about 3 hours to prepare, film and then edit this video. So the advertising revenue is really, really useful to me, and helps me spend less time working out of doing YouTube stuff, and I can then concentrate on doing videos like this. So if you wouldn't mind subscribing, you don't have to have alerts turned on for new videos, but please do subscribe. And I hope you found this useful. If you did, also let me know in the comments, because it does make my day when somebody says, oh, I've been battling with a problem or setting this up for weeks or days or whatever, and your videos really helped. So yeah, thank you very much.